Good afternoon, dear teachers. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Katia Valley, Schools and Exams Marketing Manager, and I'm talking to you from our office in São Paulo. What about you? Where are you joining from? Is this your first webinar with us, or have you been joining us lately? Hello, Franciele from Joinville. Good to have you here. Recife present. Ecuador, wonderful. Nova Era. Carla, hello, good afternoon. Santa Catarina, Gislaine. Dolores from Argentina, wonderful. Yes, I see people have been following us here and attending several of our webinars. Wonderful, thank you so much for participating. Ukraine via Peru, wonderful. Nashville, US. You are such wonderful people, teachers. Well, we have delivered several webinars in September and also in October. So if you feel like re-watching those webinars or checking the ones you couldn't attend live, please just use your mobile phones and scan this QR code. It will take you to Cambridge YouTube channel, Cambridge Brazil YouTube channel, where you will find all the recordings. I invite you to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and also LinkedIn with several updates and interesting articles. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. If this is the first time you are here with us, we will have some time for questions at the end, and we kindly ask you to send the questions in the Q&A tool. It helps us organize the questions better. By the end of this presentation, take a look at the chat. There will be a link for feedback, and from the feedback form, you will have access to download your certificate. As I told you, all these webinars are being recorded, and the recording will be soon available in our Cambridge Brazil YouTube channel. Today, we have the honor and the privilege of having Herbert Puchta with us, who holds a PhD in ELT pedagogy, was a professor of English at the Teacher Training University in Graz, Austria, and is a well-known plenary speaker at numerous international conferences. For more than 3 decades, Herbert has done research into the practical application of findings from cognitive psychology and brain research to the teaching of English as a foreign language. Herbert has co-authored numerous course books, as well as articles and resource books. His latest resource books are Teaching Young Learners to Think and Activities for Very Young Learners. His course books include Super Safari for the very little ones, Super Minds, which is in the 2nd edition now for primary students, and Think, 2nd edition for teenagers, and also Empower for adults and young adults. Let's welcome our today's speaker. Hi, Herbert.
Hello, Katia, and hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you. Thanks for the invitation, and welcome everybody to this webinar. Thanks very much, Katia, for your kind words.
Thank you.
And thank you, Maju, for your support on the technical side.
Exactly. You're closing our series of webinars with a golden key, Herbert.
Okay. Okay, lovely. Can I start sharing my screen?
Yes, please.
Absolutely, I will do so immediately. So here we go. I think it's this one. Is it the right one? Share. Yes, should be the right one.
I can see. We can see your slides. Have a good presentation. I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Katia. Well, hello again, everybody. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm going to be talking about this topic today, which is very dear to my heart because, first of all, I love teaching teenagers. I love developing materials for teenagers. And I believe that developing creativity is one of the most important objectives that we as teachers of English can actually have in mind when it comes to teaching young people successfully. So let's just have a look at the different areas that I would like to look at in this session today. I would start by talking about what is creativity. It's interesting. We can tell creativity when we see it, and yet it seems rather difficult to actually define what creativity really is. Yes, hello. I can see Ghislaine saying hello, and Alessandra, good afternoon. Do when you want to say something, I'm going to, as much as possible, I'm going to look at the comments in the chat box, and I'll be delighted to react to what you're saying there. Second point, the question, why we should develop creativity in the English language class with teenagers. Of course, most teachers complain about a lack of time. They have to do many things. They have to carry out tests. They have to care about, I don't know, international exams, and they want to prepare their students for that. And they have to cover a syllabus and what have you. So the question is, are there any good reasons why we should develop creativity in ELT? And the next point is an important one. Teenagers are generally regarded as students that can actually be quite difficult. I used to quote Michael Grinder a lot, who once said, if you can teach teenagers, you can teach anyone. And it is true, of course, that it is easier to teach young learners if you know how to. It's probably easier to teach adult students or young adults, but teenagers, especially adolescents, can be a little bit challenging. So we will look at that also and see how we can initiate creativity in the teenage classroom. I will be sharing a number of practical examples also with you, suggestions you can try out. I'm saying here tomorrow. Well, some of you may have their Saturday off, so I'm not expecting you all to try them out tomorrow. But what I mean here, of course, is that these are activities that can be immediately applied to the classroom. So let's actually start with a look at children for a moment, because this is when it all begins. And I'd like to start with a little personal anecdote, which is about my grandson, who is now a teenager. He's 13 and a few months. But the anecdote is about a time when he was, I think, 4.5. And it was January in Austria. I'm from Austria. I live in the middle of nowhere, in a little village in the southeast of Austria. And he was 4.5. I had him on my arm, and we were looking out at the landscape, and we were both fascinated because it was snowing. And what you have to know, it was January and very cold. And when it's very cold, we actually talk about dry snow. The snow doesn't contain a lot of water. And when you have this kind of snow falling, it's not that the snowflakes fall down in a straight movement. It's more I would almost call it a dance, especially when there is a little bit of a breeze. Then the snowflakes seem to carry out a dance as they're falling to the ground. So we were looking out, and the 4.5-year-old grandson was maybe even more fascinated than I was. When suddenly he said to me, and I have translated this into English, when suddenly he said to me in his own language, in German, he said, "Can snowflakes think?" And I was a bit surprised, as you can imagine. And I said, what makes you ask this question? And he said, just look at them, which confused me a little bit more, because what was the connection between looking at the movement of the snowflakes and his assumption or his query whether snowflakes could actually think? So I said, And he said, I believe, look, they can think. To which I replied, uh-huh. And he said, well, look here. How do they decide? And it was obviously that he was watching the movement of the snowflakes, and he saw that they were kind of changing direction every now and then. And he thought that every time they change direction, maybe they make a decision. So, but I still was a bit insecure where he was going. So I said, decide what? And he said, how do they decide where to land? They must be thinking. And I was stunned. And I would like to ask you now to just to you know, take this in a little bit, and then maybe write in the chat box. I don't know if you think that what's going on here in this child's mind is actually creative. So if you think so, then let us know, because we are hopefully getting closer to the idea, what is creativity? So please let us know what you think is creative about the dialogue. Rosendo actually says it's a creative activity. But I can guarantee it wasn't planned at all. So if you think there is something creative about it, then what is it? What is the creativity maybe in the child's thinking? I'll give you a moment to... His way of imagining what was going on, there was something else there. It's not predictable to consider that a thing like snowflakes could think, even not being a human. Absolutely, but we also know that for children, objects can have a life in their imagination. That's the case, isn't it? There's a personification resource, his imagination. That's a good point. They're all extremely good points. Imagination and creativity are always kind of like paired up. Maybe he was thinking about a cartoon. Maybe he was. He sees snowflakes as people. I believe the creativity is in his wonder, in how he can imagine something so fantastic. The idea of creativity is connected to imagination, Caroline. He's using a previous knowledge about humans and he's applying it to things. He's wondering whether this is the case. His freedom of thought, I think that is creative because it was completely based on the child's imagination and his thoughts about what was going on at that time. I see that he's a happy person. Oh, that's interesting. And he connects imagination with things that he feels. And I have another crazy. She's like, yes, I have another question. What, if anything, facilitates the child's creativity. And you've already said one thing several times, his imagination. Is there anything else that you think helps the child to access his creativity? Love, thank you, Christiane. Observation, freedom, yes. Paulo Freire comes to mind, doesn't he? Your great son. Okay, thanks so much. I mean, the perception of children is fantastic because their imagination knows no bounds, absolutely. But we also know, of course, that we could immediately destroy it if we reacted in the wrong way. So if the child says to me in this case, can snowflakes think? If I said, what a silly question, then the child would immediately freeze and be completely quiet and think, I must be silly to ask such a ridiculous question. And this is where we are. Some people actually say that all children are born creative in a way, and this kind of creativity is not always facilitated in the right way. So let's have a look at what is creativity. And I think what I'm going to share with you now really reflects and mirrors extremely well the things that you have said here. I've already mentioned that we can all tell creativity, yet there is not one agreed on definition. The kind of definition that I like a lot comes from the late Sir Ken Robinson. And it's from his book, Out of Our Minds. So that's where the craziness comes in a way that somebody actually alluded to. And Ken Robinson said, when we actually talk about creativity, we usually have three different concepts in mind, or one of these three different concepts in mind. One is actually imagination, and that's something that several of you actually mentioned. The second one is creativity as such. And the third one, innovation. I think that was mentioned also by you. And his definition of the three, I think, are actually brilliant, and they help us to keep these three things apart. The first one, imagination, he says, that's the process of bringing to mind things that are not present to our senses. Now, I heard from Katia previously that at the moment, at least in Sao Paulo, it's actually quite cool, and there is no spring there yet. But you were probably, when you started this webinar with me, you were not thinking of snowflakes and snow falling down. I hope I brought to your imagination, to your mind, the movement of snowflakes. I hope that you can even imagine standing somewhere on a meadow here in Austria, and it's pretty cold out there, and you're fascinated by these snowflakes as they land on your skin, maybe even on your nose. We can bring things to our minds that are not present to our senses through our imagination. It was Einstein actually who said that imagination, is more important than knowledge. And that's a fascinating thought. And of course, he wasn't saying that knowledge is not important. But without knowledge, we would be like parrots. We could regurgitate the knowledge that we have, but we could not come up with new things. We could not imagine new theories in science. We couldn't come up with creative language thoughts, with poetry and novels and what have you. The second one, creativity, the process of developing original ideas that have value. And the third one, innovation, the process of putting new ideas into practice. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that, when I work with my students on something creative, of course, other people have been creative in language before, but they could come up with something like my grandson when he was 4 years old, in his mother tongue, I have to add, of course, here, which was unique, based on his imagination, using his original ideas. And that's what we somehow want to achieve in the language classroom also. Hello also now to colleagues from Egypt and Ecuador. So it's not only Brazil that is present today. I'm delighted to welcome you all. And we have this lovely definition of creativity that Rosendo says, exchange real things to unreal and transport them to a new world of fantasy. I like that a lot also. Okay. Now, warm greetings from Algeria. Warmest greetings back to Algeria. Okay, let's carry on. And can I ask you, any thoughts on why we should develop creativity in the English language class, please? Just a few words, just a bit of brainstorming. You don't need to write long sentences, a word or two will do. It's important to maintain the students' interest in the class. Thank you, Perla, Samantha. And you see how far students can go through stories. That's already a practical suggestion from Rosendo. It develops autonomy, Ellis Lane. Silva, yes, thank you very much. Okay. Lovely. Thanks for your thoughts. Let's look into this a little bit further. The world is so heavy that we need to think outside the box. You have to be creative to catch their attention and maybe admiration. We need it in creative thinking for some learners. Okay, good. Now, here are a number of reasons. First of all, language itself is inherently creative, isn't it? It's not actually that language learning successfully is about, I don't know, learning 9,000 sentences and 450 dialogues by heart, and then you can go out into the world and use language successfully. Language is creative, and we need to be creative if we want to express ourselves successfully. Creativity arouses motivation, and it sustains self-esteem. If somebody creates something, then they will be highly motivated and motivated. Absolutely, Anilton. It encourages risk-taking, encourages spontaneity. We need, in order to learn language successfully, we need to take risks. If I only dare to say the things I'm 100% sure are absolutely correctly, then most of the time I will probably, as a learner, I will probably be very quiet. So we want spontaneity, we want risk-taking. It makes our lessons more enjoyable for learners, and it helps up to free inhibitions. That comes from Alan Maley's book, 50 Creative Activities. But we also know that, especially when it comes to teaching teenagers, things are not always that easy. I think this is what this colleague has in her thoughts right now, as she's saying, developing creativity. I wish I had Could you kindly complete her sentence, please? Seems a bit skeptical, bit doubtful. I wish I had imagination, myself, more ideas, time, an open heart, freedom. There's the syllabus I have to keep to. More time, an open mind. I wish I had read more books to help boost my imagination and creativity. Imagination. Different places to go. Yeah, places can actually inspire us. Enthusiasm. Maybe she doesn't have enough enthusiasm, Germana. Thank you. Now, lovely. Thank you so much. One of the things that I often hear is, I wish I had more time. And I can, of course, understand that. The question is it worth the investment? And I would like to share a quotation that comes from Guy Cook's book on language learning and language play. He says, a person who can play with a language in creative and socially effective ways to tell a joke or a story could certainly also buy an airline ticket. The reverse, however, is not necessarily true. The ability to play with the language effectively is indicative of a broader command and can be used as a test of proficiency. And I love this quotation. I love it because once our students learn to be creative, and it's not always easy to get them there, but once they learn to be creative, they will actually be able to express themselves better also in other areas, in non-creative areas, because they will be free, they will not be worried of making mistakes so much, and they will be at ease with trying to express something that they haven't said before, so that it's actually easier for them to improvise. Absolutely, Ghislaine. I would like to add one point to the points that Ellen Maley actually mentioned previously, and that is creativity makes language more memorable. Okay, we're talking about what is called in psychology, in cognitive psychology, the generation effect. Somebody creates something, generates something themselves, they will remember it better. Rosendo, thanks so much for your kind compliment there. You love the creative activities in my course book, Think, for secondary students, for your high school students. Thanks so much. Lovely. So, what I would like to do, I would like to look now at teenagers a little bit, because to be honest, I've given probably more than 100 seminars and webinars all over the world on creativity. And sometimes what happens, you know, especially initially, I shared all these wonderful ideas, and then I was sometimes very frustrated because at the end of the webinar or the seminar, when I asked for feedback, sometimes colleagues said, but how can I, you know, activate my students to be creative? They are not creative at all. Your ideas are lovely, but they wouldn't work with my learners. That made me think. That really was food for thought. My first reaction, of course, was, now you're asking me, I've shown you 12 highly creative activities. But then I thought, well, hang on a minute. Probably the most difficult thing is not to have another brilliant creative activity for a class that is already very creative. maybe the most challenging thing is to actually start up the process of creativity, to help teenagers become creative who maybe believe, well, I'm not creative, or I don't want to be creative for all kinds of reasons. So let's look into this a little bit now. Teenagers are faced, of course, as we all know, with a huge task. The task is developing their own identity, finding out who they are and who they need to be. Ghislaine, yes, a step-by-step approach. They are very insecure, although especially these days, they seem so cool, especially when they are part of their peer group. But we must not forget that very often they seek the shelter of the peer group. In other words, they're cool among the peer group, but as individuals, they are often pretty insecure. And they often fear being ridiculed also by their peer group, and being ridiculed especially when they maybe want to say something that is different from other people. And that's exactly what we expect them to do when we want them to be creative. We want them to say things, and we want them to write things that are unique, that are different, and that requires courage. So they know they will stick out from the peer group as soon as they engage in developing something creative, which on the one hand is something they long for, because stepping out from the peer group, raising your own voice, developing your own voice, and I'm not just talking about the sound, but your identity, that is something that they would love to do. And at the same time, they dread it because it is a little bit dangerous. So I think in order to get creativity started, teenagers need a classroom culture they want to belong to. That has to do with our leadership. We have to give them security. We have to step in when teens tease each other, when they ridicule each other, when they maybe become even a bit bullyish sometimes. We need to step in. They need to feel secure. They need trust. They need respect. So we need to show them that we trust them and respect them. They need an error-tolerant learning discourse. Of course, we want them to make fewer and fewer mistakes, and we will practice and we will help them to improve. But the time when we get them to activate their creativity, that is time for language play, where errors are not only not a big problem, they are also natural. They are important because they're part of the learning process. And the third point here, they need the space for non-threatening language play, where we make it clear to them that we don't expect them, at least initially, to create masterpieces, okay? There's time for masterpieces a bit later. But what we actually need in order to get it all started is fun, icebreakers, and energizers. And this is where I would like to actually share with you one icebreaker that I use a lot, and I'll give you the reason why I use it. I cannot properly do it with you. I call it loud, clear, and fast. And this is how it works. I mean, you can do it wherever you are at the moment watching this from. You can imagine, use your imagination. Imagine that we are in a big lecture theater now, and I'm asking you, I'm telling you that I'm going to show you a series of slides. On each slide, there is a bit of language. And what I want you to do is, I want you to read out what you see on each slide as loudly as possible, as clearly as possible, and as fast as you can. Okay? Here we go. All right. And now the second go. This time what I want you to do is we're going to do it again. I'm going to show you a series of words. And what I want you to do now is I want you to read out, to say as fast as possible, as loudly as possible, and as clearly as possible. You shout out the color of each word. You don't read out the word, you shout out the color of each word. Okay. And you can believe me, whenever I have done this with teachers in a real face-to-face seminar, teachers made mistakes, but it doesn't matter because some people still think they have to read, but actually they have to say the color of the words. And what we create is a bit of creative chaos. And it doesn't matter that there are some mistakes. Quite the contrary, people start laughing when they're making mistake. And this is what we actually want from our students. We want those icebreakers so they exactly. The second part is tricky, Miriam. We want them to make mistakes. We want them to enjoy this. We want them to see language use as a game. So the question that I have asked myself, and this is what I'm going to look at now, what do you do when students are not creative at all? Or what do you do when students don't believe they can be creative? Or what do you do when students don't dare to become creative? I think what we have to do is we actually have to take, and one of you said this, one of you said a step-by-step approach. And there is a quotation here from John Wooden who says, it's the little details that are vital. Little things make big things happen. So we need an approach where we don't expect much, where we actually take them on a track where we have little steps. And I have a little visual metaphor for this. And when I am doing, when I'm doing a webinar, I actually said, and this is my grandson now, which is not true, of course. We need to, this is why I'm showing this, we need to kickstart the creative process with the help of micro creativity. You may not have heard this term. I think I came up with it first. And I'm going to show you a number of things now, how we can encourage them to be creative using micro creativity. And I'm using, number one, the generation effect first. Now, have a look at this. This is a very traditional kind of gap-filling activity, isn't it? I have told them a story, they have read a text, and now they're filling in these sentences that they heard previously in the story. And it's once upon a time there was a man and his son, they apologized to him, etc., etc., etc. Well, this is of course not creative. This is a reconstructive activity. Can be useful. We are not querying that. We have all done that. But this is not a creative activity. I'd just like to show you now what you can do so you turn this activity into a micro creativity one. So imagine this. Here we have the words they have to fill in on one side of the worksheet, if this is a worksheet. And they have to put it in now. Now, this is a little bit more challenging. They're more likely to make errors, mistakes, but also they will see from my reaction that it's perfectly okay to make mistakes. And if you want a next step, then this would be this. Something is missing. Try to complete the sentences. And this is Sharifian. The generation effect refers to the finding that learners are more likely to remember the items that they have generated in one way or another, either totally or partially, than the items they've just read and memorized. And I would like to go back to my activities because I'd like to say another thing. So this is what you can do after you've told them the story. But how about if you do this before you tell them the story? So they don't have a context yet. And they're trying to put these words in. They're trying to make meaning using these words. Or in this particular case, you don't even give them the word. But again, you use this just as a change before you tell them a story. You see what I mean? This is more creative. It's not a hugely creative activity, but it's a micro step towards creativity. And the second one along the same lines is what is called productive failure. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this is a typical activity from a workbook, maybe. I think this is actually from somewhere in Think. So match the parts of the sentences. Unless someone lends me a bit of money, I won't be able to take the bus home. I'll only be able to go to the concert if my dad drives me there, etc., etc., etc. What about... So here the students are already familiar with the new concept, the new grammar structure, and obviously here it's unless and if only. How about this? And this is food for thought. In his paper examining productive failure, productive success, unproductive failure, and unproductive success in learning, Capers says, productive failure engages students in solving problems requiring concepts they have yet to learn, followed by consolidation and instruction on the targeted concept. By failure, I simply mean that students will typically not be able to generate or discover the correct solutions by themselves. However, to the extent that students are able to use their prior knowledge to generate suboptimal or even incorrect solutions to the problem, the process can be productive in preparing them to learn better from the instruction that follows. In other words, we normally teach a grammar concept, then we present a grammar concept, we engage them in thinking a bit, maybe about the rules in an inductive way. We practice the grammar, and then somehow we do some transfer activities where we get them to personalize and use the structure to express something that is true of themselves, for example. And that is a trialed and tested way, and we are all doing that, and it works well. How about turning the thing on its head, at least occasionally, and give them a grammar activity before they have learned the grammar concept? What Capers is saying here is, okay, they will generate suboptimal or even incorrect sentences, but the process involves a lot of thinking, and that thinking prepares them to learn better from the instruction that follows, because they're getting it wrong, they're thinking about it. We will then motivate them to also focus more on the actual concept. So here, the teacher is giving them the first half of those sentences without the second half of the sentences, without having taught the grammar concept, and says to the students, try and complete those sentences so they are meaningful. And students have not learned the correct construction, but they will begin to think. They will have a question, maybe they will ask you, what does unless mean, and things like that. But we want them to actually produce sentences here that even if they are wrong, they will actually try to express something with that. So try this out, productive failure. This is something I've tried out several times, even with primary students, and it's always worked extremely well. And of course, students are welcome to make mistakes because they haven't learned this yet, and they will understand that. And it's a fascinating process to lead them there. Very much. Yes, absolutely, Miriam. It sets the students at the center of the learning process, very much as Niklas was trying to figure out, can they think, these snowflakes? Look, they are changing directions. Are they thinking now? Are they making decisions? So this is how students start thinking here. I'd like to do a creative activity with you that I love. It's an activity I've learned from my friend and colleague Alan Maley, and it's actually called a word array. Now, a word array, what you do is you take a short text and you write down for your students all the words in that text as a list in several columns, okay? Now, all this together is a coherent piece of text. Now, what I say to my students is, take a few minutes, work individually first, use the words in the word array to generate as many correct sentences as you can, okay? You generate as many correct sentences as you can within, say, 2 minutes. Write them down. We have 3 rules here. Rule number 1, you are only allowed to use words that are here on this slide. You cannot use any other word, okay? You cannot change the form of the words. So you could say, I don't know, I'd wish and something, but you cannot say I've wished or I'm wishing or something like that. You have to keep to the forms. The second one and the third one is you can use any word from this slide as often as you want. Oh, I have 2 more rules. You do not have to use all the words. It's okay if you only use half of them, a quarter of them, whatever. And the sentences can be as long and as short as you wish. Doesn't matter. So you can only use words from the slide. You can only use the forms that are there. You cannot change the forms. You can use any word as often as you want. You don't have to use all the words. And the sentences can be any length. Can you just type in 1 or 2 sentences, please? I'll give you a minute. I listened to my father. Lovely. Thank you very much, Shimana. I wish I hadn't shouted. Fantastic. And now you can carry on. You can say, I wish I hadn't. Okay, well, that's fine. First, I drove far. I wouldn't wish that for his father. Lovely. Thank you. Now, the great thing is, because they can't change the form, I wish I hadn't missed the other webinars. But that's already creative. We'll do that later. I put my only foot in a big bed. I wish I hadn't made a mistake, etc., etc., etc. This is when I tried this out in a class. This is what one student gave me or said. I shouted. My father said I'd made a big mistake. I wish I'd listened to my father. I wish I hadn't shouted, very same sentence, if only I had listened. Now, what we do next is we ask students to work in pairs. They compare their sentences and they make a composite list. In other words, they list up all their sentences. Now they work with another pair. So they form a group of 4, and they actually try to look at all their sentences. They share their sentences, and they create a poem or a short poetic text. And it works well if they use these paper slips that they have written the sentences on, and they rearrange them. And often, because there are certain structures in there, like I wish I hadn't listened or something like that, I wish I hadn't shouted. So we get some poetic quality. This is a text that was created by a group of B1 students in a class where I tried that out. A lesson, because they also wanted to write a title there. My father said I'd made a big mistake. My feeling? Nervous. If only he hadn't said that. I put my foot down. I shouted. I wish I hadn't. I stopped. I listened. I sat down. I planted a tree. That was a surprising ending. I love this. Okay, now I can finish this off. I may finish this off with a quotation first from Chomsky. Without this tension between necessity and freedom, rule and choice, there can be no creativity, no communication, no meaningful acts at all. So if we give them words that are already in a certain form, of course they choose, but they have to kind of fit in with certain rules there. And my words were actually from a grammar rap that I wrote some time ago. It's from the second edition of Think. The unit is on I wish and if only plus past perfect. And I'm playing it to you now.
Yeah, let's go. I wish I hadn't listened to my father when he said, yes, it's time for your first driving lesson. Let's go. I wish I'd stayed in bed. Yes, I did. If only I hadn't gone. And sat down in his car. In his car. I had a feeling then. Yes. That we wouldn't be going far. Oh no. I wish he hadn't shouted as I drove into the street. His shouting made me nervous, so nervous, and I mixed up both my feet. If only I had put my foot down on the brake. Oh no. Instead, we sped straight ahead. A pretty big mistake. Big mistake. If only they hadn't planted that enormous tree. It was massive. Oh no. It stopped our car from going far. And Dad was mad at me. Mad at me. Now lesson 1 is over. And lesson 2 can wait. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. There's time for everything in life. Yes, there is. And that's why life's so great. So great.
Okay, well, it is time for me to actually say it's actually from Students Book 3, Think, second edition, if anybody's interested in that. And it has a whole range of grammar raps in each of the levels. I'd like to finish off with a quotation that comes from Ken Robinson, who said, "To improve our schools, we have to humanize them and make education personal to every student and teacher in the system. Education is always about relationships. Great teachers are not just instructors and test administrators. They are mentors, coaches, motivators, and lifelong sources of inspiration to their students. Teaching is an art form. Great teachers know they have to cultivate curiosity, passion, and creativity in their students." I'd like to thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes for questions. Back to Katja.
Thank you so much, Herbert, for this inspiring presentation. Let me check here in the Q&A. Come on, teachers. Are there any questions to Herbert? We have time for that. I loved your one of your last slides, Herbert. Teaching is art form, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and thanks everybody also for your kind feedback there. It's been a pleasure for me, and thank you so much for being so active in this session. I think, Katja, we don't have a question, I think.
I don't think so. I think they are still processing everything that they have learned.
Lovely. Somebody was asking there, will it be on YouTube, Katja?
Yes. Very soon we will upload the recording on YouTube.
Lovely.
Just follow Cambridge Brazil on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and you will receive a notification.
Lovely. Thank you.
All right. Don't be shy, teachers. I'm sure you would like to ask Herbert something, I guess.
I will not be crying if you... Do you have books on this? Yes, I do, actually. You mean resource books?
I think so,
yeah,
Herbert.
Okay. I have a book called Teaching Grammar Creatively. That is a resource book together with Scott Thornbury, where we have literally dozens of ideas for teaching grammar in a very creative way. I have a book called Imagine That, which is also about kindling their imagination. And actually, since I have, there's a Cambridge book also, it's called 101 Tips for Teaching Teenagers, if I may promote that. There you will also find a number of creative ideas on how to work with teenagers.
Oh, so we have questions now. It's just a matter of giving teachers some time. So from João Alencar, some people are placing their bets on tech for the future of education, but I agree with you and Ken's quote on humanizing education. Do you agree that creativity is mostly encouraged teachers than by artificial intelligence?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Look, actually, I still need to be persuaded that artificial intelligence has a meaningful place in the classroom. I can see how we can maybe use it when our students have a very high level of language already, and how we can do some critical thinking, comparing a text written by AI with a text written by a human being, and get students to elaborate on that, and so on and so forth. But teaching is about relationships. Ken Robinson says it so beautifully. And I don't want my kids and my grandson to have relationships with machines only. When it comes to relationships, we need teachers, and we need caring teachers who are prepared to kindle this imagination. Do you recommend any reading to develop students' creativity despite little resources in schools? For teachers, well, since I've been asked, I've quoted 3 of my books here. There are actually other books. There is this book by Ken Robinson. If you want one that is not about language teaching, but about creativity and the challenges that we have faced as teachers. And there are, of course, many other books about creativity. I'm not claiming I'm the only person who writes about and thinks about creativity. Alan Maley's book, 50 Creative Activities, is a great place to start. I used one activity from his book there. The activities that you showed us today is for B1 plus. B1 plus, yes. We have others for B2 and even C1 in Think. So the course goes from A1 to C1, and we have grammar wraps with all the different grammar chapters and grammar concepts throughout the course, and they are all with animation, so animated videos like the one you saw there. Yes. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Rosendo, for saying that you learned a lot. That's very kind. Thank you. That's making my day. I'm soon going to bed. Not quite yet. It's dark here already. I'm here in Austria, and I think 5 hours ahead of you. Well, thank you a million. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks. Katja, can you hear us still? I think Katja's video has frozen up. So I would like to thank you very much on behalf of Cambridge University Press, and on my behalf, thank you so much for joining in. I'm sure the colleagues from the office in Sao Paulo or your local representatives will help you with any questions you may have about also Think and all the other Cambridge products. It was great to have you. And watch this space. You will soon get the link to the recording of this webinar. Thank you all very much, and bye-bye. Thanks.